What's going on, everyone? This is the Noah Gillian Show, and I, of course, am your host, Noah Gillian. So happy you decided to join in today. It is the 12th of September, 2023, and on today's episode, we are going to be discussing the Eagles' opening weekend win, as well as some other storylines around the league. Before we get into the show, please hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please give us that 5-star. Follow the show. It really helps us grow as a podcast. Also, you can find us on Twitter, Instagram. All the handles are in the description below. If you're watching on YouTube, I got the show's handles right here for you. And without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Week 1 officially in the books, and I can honestly say that was one of the weirdest starts to a season that I can honestly remember. That does not mean there was any lack of storylines, though, and quite the opposite. Quite the opposite, however. So to start off the episode, we're going to talk Eagles, and then we'll get into more of the NFL as a whole. So let's jump right into the breakdown. So we had the Eagles getting an opening day victory for the third consecutive year under head coach Nick Sirianni, and they did so in an ugly fashion. It was a textbook week 1 game. Ended up winning 25-20, and it was a slugfest. Like I mentioned, the offense really struggled to catch a rhythm, and the defense pretty much stepped up when the game mattered most, and this was a win you can chalk up to that defensive unit. I have a bunch of quick thoughts on the game, and I'll also reference some numbers as we get going here. So number one, we have to talk about number one, right? Jalen Hurts, just to be honest, did not have a great game. I think he had a decent game. Like, he had a solid game, ended up going 22 for 33, so 66% completion percentage, not bad. Good, very good, actually. Only 170 yards and 1 touchdown through the air. He also ran 9 times for 37 yards for 4.18 clip. No rushing touchdowns. Also lost a fumble in an absolutely crucial moment of the game. So Jalen Hurts' performance, what do we make of it? Obviously coming off the massive extension that he got this offseason after leading the Eagles all the way to the Super Bowl last year. There was a lot of expectations for Jalen Hurts. There was a ton of expectations, and I think for the most part, I think he did really well in this game. I think that his decision-making was crisp with what the offense was running. Obviously, the Patriots and Bill Belichick is not an easy opening game or a game in general for anybody, let alone an offense coordinator making his NFL debut as a play caller. And in week 1, nonetheless, when all Bill Belichick's been doing for the last probably 2 weeks straight is just watch Eagles tape from last year. So it was as tough as a matchup as you could get, honestly, in week 1. And Jalen Hurts, I thought, did very, very well taking what the defense was given. It seemed like they were really trying to take away those deep balls, and it seemed early on it was a lot of check downs. It was a lot of dump offs to Kenny Gainwell. It was a lot of short passes to Devontae Smith. And I thought it was well executed. Obviously, Jalen didn't have as great of a numbers game as we may have expected from him, but honestly, 66% completion percentage, I think that's pretty good in terms of taking what the defense gave you and not really forcing anything. We saw in last night's game, the Monday Night Football game, when the quarterback really forces things, it can put your team behind the 8 ball, no matter how good your quarterback is, your defense is, your weapons are. If your quarterback puts the ball in harm's way, bad things can happen. So that's where I thought the maturity of Jalen Hurts was evident. I thought it was clear as day watching the game. His ability to read the defense. He did a good job checking at the line of scrimmage as well. That was one thing they mentioned. Tony Romo mentioned on the broadcast was the next step for him will be the comfort level at the line of scrimmage, checking out of plays and into better looks. And I thought he did well with that. I overall thought he did really well. I'd give him a B grade, honestly. I thought he could have done better. There was some throws that he missed. There's no doubt about it. Didn't really, that might be a Brian Johnson thing, so I'll give that a second. but got his guys involved for the most part on the outside. Devontae Smith had 7 catches. A.J. Brown had 7 catches. In a game where A.J. was pretty quiet most of the game, it felt like he still ended up with 7 for 79. Also had a deep ball of about 30 yards that he bobbled, even though it looked like it could have gone either way. They called it a catch on the field, and then it got overturned. So he probably could have went up over 100 yards, and maybe even on that drive they ended up scoring something there. But Devontae Smith, just unguardable in the short and intermediate ranges. Also just a ridiculous catch in the end zone for a touchdown. Beautiful ball from Jalen Hurts on that one after the Ezekiel Elliott fumble. That was, you had to take advantage there, and Hurts put it only where Devontae could get it, and thank God Devontae caught that, because it was a huge play in the game just to put a little distance between them in the first quarter. So overall, I really liked what Jalen Hurts did. Staying, on the offense for a second, Brian Johnson, his first game as offensive coordinator, play caller, I thought it was a good first game. Nick Sirianni even came out after the game and said he probably should have had his starters play a little bit more in the preseason. And I don't know really where I fall on that argument, because, on one hand of the spectrum, it's like, do I want my guys out there getting accustomed to getting hit again, getting accustomed to the game speed? I mean, Mike Tomlin said it best. I mean, how are you going to, the best way to, I love Mike Tomlin and his saying, so I don't want to do him any injustice by saying it wrong, but pretty much what he was saying is, we need to spar to be able to fight. And, I thought that was just a great introspective statement. Like, you can't just walk into the boxing ring on a title fight and expect to, come in healthy and all that stuff. It's like, no, you need to spar. You need to get hit a little bit. You need to feel what it feels like to put that letter on them and feel coming back the other way. So I think that, the Eagles would have benefited from that a little bit. Obviously, all 22 starters coming into the year. There was nobody on the injury report. So I like that, but at the same time, there was definitely some rust to knock off. Last year, the Eagles' first team got, a couple series in I believe week 2 of the preseason. I don't know if it was week 1 or week 2, but they got a little bit of action. Everyone took a hit, everyone felt good, and then their opening game last year, obviously it was a tight game that they barely won, but they put up 35 points. The offense looked really, really, really good. So I don't want to bury Brian Johnson too much for how the offense looked, or bury Jalen Hurts too much for how the offense looked, or the fact that Dallas Goedert only had 1 target on the day when he is supposed to be a focal point of the team. I'm not going to blame him. This was a game where you won ugly. At the end of the day, I say this all the time. The box scores don't have pictures, and at the end of the day, the Eagles scored more points than the Patriots, and they got the win. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how it looks. But moving forward, it is going to matter how it looks. And, obviously they got a quick turnaround. 2 days, they play the Minnesota Vikings on primetime home opener. They're dealing with some injuries too, which we'll go over in a second. But as you kind of move through the first month of the season, once you kind of get toward the back end of September and once you get into October, that's when you really need to start to stamp your identity. And I think the Eagles know that. I think they're missing Miles Sanders a little bit on offense, honestly. I was a proponent to let him go. And, I was excited about Rashad Penny getting signed, DeAndre Swift getting signed. But they really didn't run the ball, which was really, really surprising. I mean, Kenny Gainwell got 14 carries. Kenny Gainwell got 14 carries for 54 yards, so not really super efficient for him, but, still got some good movement there. DeAndre Swift only got 1 carry. Boston Scott only got 1 carry. We still outrushed New England, which, we always do, but we didn't even hit 100 yards on the ground, which is something that, we routinely do. Almost every single week. So the rushing attack was a little confusing. Rashad Penny was a healthy scratch from this game, which was a little concerning. I would expect him to be active next week, but then again, are you really want to carry 4 running backs every week into game day? I don't know. So I think it's going to be interesting to see, what happens the next couple days on the injury report and see, who ends up playing, because they are missing that. Miles Sanders was really up and down last year, but at the same time, he provided something that I don't think we have right now in the backfield. I'd like to give DeAndre Swift some more carries because I think he can be that guy. But it seems that the Eagles trust Kenny Gainwell a little bit more in pass protection, in running the football, and just with the system in general. So maybe as the season goes on, Swift gets more worked into it, and we'll see kind of what happens there. But overall in the offense, I mean, we scored 25 points, so it's not like we only scored 14 or 17 or something like that. We scored over 24, so I was pretty happy with what happened offensively. But the real stars of the show were on the defensive side of the ball. Mac Jones had a great day. There's no two ways about it. Overall, Mac Jones finished 35 for 54 with 316 yards, 3 touchdowns. Also threw an interception. He got over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. So that's what you can ask for if you're the Patriots fans. But the Eagles' defense was all over the place. They were active in the passing game. Obviously, Darius Slay made the play of the game, which turned out to be the difference. The pick 6 was a little bit of an overthrow by Mac Jones, tipped someone's hands, and Darius Slay returned it about 70 yards, so it wasn't like it was a walk-in in the red zone or something like that. So he made a couple people miss and took it all the way back. Great to see Slay playing well. Made a couple great pass breakups later in the game, so that was awesome to see. James Bradbury did leave the game with a concussion. He is in concussion protocol now, so he more than likely is going to miss the game against Minnesota. That hurts, but at least we still have Slay to match up against Justin Jefferson. I'm a little nervous about what Jordan Addison and KJ Osborne might do on the other side. However, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But other than that, I mean, Jalen Carter is an absolute unit. I mean, there was a lot of excitement after the draft when the Eagles were able to get him at number 9. Obviously, they had the 10th pick. They traded up 1 pick to number 9 to select Jalen Carter after he fell all the way down there. And he is just an absolute monster. There were some numbers that I wanted to talk about here. Jalen Carter, he had 6 pressures, which were tied for the most pressures by any rookie defensive tackle over the last 5 seasons. So absolutely phenomenal. Jalen Carter was the 5th highest graded among all defensive players in week 1 with 92.1. He had the most total pressures in the league with 8. So he ended up with 8 pressures, the most out of any defensive lineman in the league, and he was the 5th highest graded player among all defensive players, defensive linemen, linebackers, and secondary members. So this guy is an absolute steal of a player. He is just absolutely phenomenal and really, really looks good. And that's not taking anything away from Jordan Davis, who was absolutely on fire in the game as well. Jordan Davis ended up playing extremely well. 3 tackles, 3 assisted tackles. Jordan Davis also had half a sack. He split that with Josh Sweat. So you're talking about between Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, you're talking about 1.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble, which Jordan Davis stripped Ezekiel Elliott of. Kind of got that big bear claw in there and punched it Ezekiel Elliott. Eagles end up scoring right after that. So these boys look ready to play. They look like proper successors to Fletcher Cox in the middle there. Milton Williams had a great game too. The defensive line depth was evident yesterday. On Sunday, you could really, really see it. Even guys that we're expecting to rely on, Hassan Reddick didn't have a phenomenal game. I mean, had 1 assisted tackle, had a couple quarterback hits, so he was really, really active. As we kind of, move down a little bit, Fletcher had a big tackle for loss on Mac Jones late in the game, and then another pressure late in the game, which, was pretty close to winning the game for there. Brandon Graham only had 1 tackle. Josh Sweat had, the half a sack, so he was getting involved a little bit. But then again, we really didn't create a ton of pressure. Through the first three quarters, we really weren't doing much. And then in the fourth quarter, we were able to really turn it on. So I was really, really excited about that. But bottom line, that I really want, the whole point being is Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis look like absolute freight trains. And if this is Fletcher Cox's last year, I think the Eagles will be more than ready to go into next year with Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter as their starting defensive tackles. So both of those guys, absolutely phenomenal. Like I mentioned, the pass rush in general was good, wasn't great. It seemed like Sean Desai was comfortable with four-man pressures most of the game. On third down, it did seem like he was a lot more willing to blitz. Which, on the back end, it seemed like our secondary was struggling with some miscommunications between the guys. So, that's just going to have to be something that gets cleaned up. But I do like the aggressiveness on third down. Not all the time. We don't need to blitz all the time on third down because the guys we do have on the defensive line are those dudes, and they can beat one-on-one blocks. But I do like Desai's willingness to at least sprinkle in more blitzes than Jonathan Gannon was willing to do last year. I think it just keeps the offensive line honest. They don't have to worry about just blocking four guys. They always have to think about there might be a fifth or sixth guy coming. So I think that was, impressive from Sean Desai in that matter. They do have a lot to clean up on the defensive end. There's no doubt about it. They have to clean up some communication. They have to clean up just technique with their secondary specifically and their linebackers. We need to figure out what's going on there. But overall, I thought they had a good day. And what it really came down to was turnovers, as all games tend to come down to, scoring off turnovers specifically. The Eagles forced 2 turnovers. The Patriots only forced 1. And on those 2 turnovers that the Eagles forced, the Eagles got 14 points off of it. And the Patriots got 0 off of their 1 turnover. So I think that is where you can really see the difference between good teams and great teams. Eagles obviously were a great team last year. They hope to be a great team this year. And execution in clutch situations when you get into the red area is a calling card for great teams. They had the interception. Obviously, their offense didn't have to do anything because Darius Slay took it all the way back and punched it into the end zone. But then Jordan Davis, I'm pretty sure either the next possession or the possession after that, but very, very close to that interception by Darius Slay, Jordan Davis punches the ball out. We fall on it. We get the ball in Patriots territory. And a few plays later, Jalen Hurts finds Devontae Smith for a touchdown. We go up 16-0. Nil. So that's where you can really see the difference. And then late in the game, it's 25-13, I believe, and Patriots go right down the field, score a touchdown, or it was 14-25 because they went for 2 and they didn't get it. So they go right down the field and score a touchdown. They go for 2, they don't get it. On the very first play of the Eagles' next drive, Jalen Hurts fumbles, which is unbelievable. It wasn't like, it was a big hit, honestly. He was a good run, 6, 7, 8 yards. Right when he got to that 8 yards, he got stuck by the safety and the ball popped out right to the defense. You can't really do anything about that. Side note, Jalen Hurts was getting down all day. When on his runs, he was sliding down. He wasn't taking any hits. It did seem on a couple plays, especially third downs, when he was getting close to the sticks, he was willing to drop his shoulder and put his body on the line. But in that situation, 1st and 10, we need to hold on to the ball. You already have 5, 6 yards. Just go down. I think that's a situation where when he looks at the film today, he's going to see that, he should have gotten down there instead of trying to force it and run somebody over. So I think he'll see that and he'll work on that and make that fix. But then again, the Patriots get the ball in plus territory and their wide receivers really weren't able to separate. Our defensive line was able to pressure Mac Jones finally and get to the quarterback. So overall, that was the difference. That was absolute difference. Even though the final spread only ended up being 5 points, those two turnovers by the Eagles and subsequent scores and the lack thereof from the Patriots was the difference in the game. So overall, I think it was a good performance, not a great performance, but at the end of the day, it's hard to win in the NFL, and anytime you can get a W, it speaks volumes about your team, especially going into New England on Tom Brady Day or whatever it was when they're celebrating Tom Brady in the stands. Everybody's up, ready to go, it was a hostile atmosphere. It was pouring rain, buckets all day, so it was tough to throw the ball. And they went in there and got the W. So overall, very, very exciting to see what they did on Sunday, and very, very excited to see what's coming up on Thursday. They are 7-point home favorites versus the Vikings on Thursday night. There's a number of injuries, obviously, from Sunday. Nakobe Dean is expected to go on injured reserve, so that really hurts, especially in a group that really didn't have much depth to begin with. So he's going to miss a minimum of 4 games for the Eagles. They also had rib injuries to Fletcher Cox and Kenny Gainwell, although both of those guys seem to be trending in the right direction, although Kenny Gainwell is, I don't think, quite as healed up as Fletcher was. James, like I mentioned, James Bradberry is going to probably miss this game because of being in concussion protocol. So, you're going to have some guys missing on the defense. I think it's going to be an up and down game. I think it's a sneaky game. I think 7 points is way too high. I'd put it closer to Eagles -4. I think they win the game, but I don't know if they win by more than a touchdown. I know I'm not high on the Vikings, and I don't really think they're that good. I think their defense is absolute garbage. But at the same time, they have Kirk Cousins, they have Justin Jefferson, Alexander Mattison, and that offensive line. I think they're going to be able to score some points against our defense as long as their offensive line can hold up. Last year we played them on Monday night in week 2, and we had absolute zero pressure. I mean, I don't even think we had a single sack. Thank God Darius Slay probably played the best game of his career against Justin Jefferson. We're going to need that again. But I think it's going to be a track meet. I think it's going to be like 30-27 or 34-27 maybe, something like that. 34-31. I'm nervous. I'm nervous about this, about their offense in general. I want to, as a fan, say that they're going to handle business at home, no problem. The atmosphere is going to be absolutely electric, but at the same time, their defensive injuries are a concern. We're going to be playing second string linebackers. We're going to be, Josh Jobe is going to be the starting cornerback opposite Darius Slay. We like Josh Jobe, but he's not James Bradberry. I think that's fair to say. Our safety help on the back end, not great. There's a chance we might be starting Sidney Brown, a rookie, in the back end. Reed Blankenship looked great. I don't want to take anything away from Reed. I mean, he was our leading tackler, 8 tackles, 3 assisted tackles, made some nice stops, couple pass breakups. So he was really involved. I really, really like Reed Blankenship. I think he's doing really, really well. But we're looking for that other safety. We're looking for linebackers. I think the defensive line will feast, but at the same time, they had a good plan for us last year, and we really couldn't get to Kirk. So it'll really just come down to a primetime game for Kirk Cousins, and maybe he'll just wilt. But at the same time, I'm worried about Justin Jefferson and that running game. Jordan Addison, the other wide receiver they had, first round pick, he could have a big game. That's a legit thing that, we have to come to grips with. Had a good game week 1. So I think it's going to be really, really fun. If the line stays at -7, I don't know if I necessarily would take that if I was, gambling on the game. But at the same time, I do expect the Eagles to win. I do expect them to be able to score. I do expect them to be able to move the ball a lot easier than they were able to on Sunday. Obviously, just the fact that they're not playing Bill Belichick's defense, and Minnesota's defense is going to be disgustingly bad. So, we'll kind of see what comes of it. But overall, good win against the Patriots, 1-0. That's all we can ask for, especially with how the rest of the division shook out. It's important to get these early season wins, even when you play bad. Need to be able to get that win. So overall, great performance from the Birds. Let's move around to the rest of the NFL recap as we just wrap up the show. I think the number one storyline in the entire NFL is Aaron Rodgers out for the season with a torn Achilles, which he suffered on the 4th snap from scrimmage for the Jets. The Jets still ended up winning 22-16 in overtime, but it really is just such a bummer for Jets fans. I usually don't feel bad for New York fans, honestly, but, this was supposed to be the year for the Jets. They still, I think everyone knew their defense was elite. They showed that last night against Josh Allen. I believe they picked him off 4 times, maybe 3 times. I think 3 times, all to the same player. And, obviously, they were able to get to Josh Allen, had a couple sacks as well. So their defense is great. And, Garrett Wilson's an absolute stud. Breece Hall is an absolute stud. Dalvin Cook looked good. Their offensive line was okay. And unfortunately, Aaron Rodgers just, was a victim of the MetLife field and that turf. And, obviously it's been written about that that's not the best field in the league, and that they should definitely change it to real grass. A lot of people are fighting that fight in where it matters. So it's going to be interesting, but it's just really just a bummer. I was really excited to see how Aaron Rodgers was going to command this offense. And unfortunately, the news today confirmed everybody's worst fears that he is going to miss the season. Zach Wilson is going to be the starter now for the foreseeable future. It'll be interesting to see if they bring in another quarterback. They're more than likely are going to bring in another quarterback, but which one they do. Joe Flacco has already been rumored to be interested in the job. He was obviously on the team last year, familiar with Robert Saleh, not this offensive coaching staff, but still familiar with the team. There's a number of other guys, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, or a trade candidate like maybe Case Keenum or Gardner Minshew. I think all those guys are probably better than Zach Wilson, but, it's just, they just need someone competent under center with that defense to be good. And that's why everybody was so excited for Aaron Rodgers. But at the end of the day, it comes down to Zach Wilson. At the end of the day, the buck stops with him, and I don't know. I was coming into the season. I was one of the people who was a non-believer in the Jets. Everyone was like, "Oh, Aaron Rodgers is there. They're a Super Bowl team." After winning 8 games last year, I just didn't really see it. And obviously, I'm not taking a victory lap because Aaron Rodgers got hurt. But at the same time, I don't really expect them to be competitive, depending on what quarterback they get. But I just don't really expect them to be super competitive anymore, the rest of the season at least. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, they get the win over the Bills, which was a monster win, especially after that letdown of Aaron Rodgers getting hurt so early in the game. But they ended up getting the dub nonetheless. The Bengals, as we move through on here, absolutely looked terrible against the Browns. They ended up getting smoked. I believe it was 24-3, the final score. And I mostly blame the rust on this, similar to with the Eagles. How none of their guys played in the preseason. Joe Burrow missed camp as well due to a strained calf, so he missed even more reps than just maybe live action ones. And this is where I give the Eagles a little bit more credit. They were able to at least move the ball and score points, whereas the Bengals just absolutely got shut down in the doghouse. Cleveland went out and just shut them down. Cleveland looked pretty good. Deshaun Watson looked okay. Nick Chubb looked great. Their defense looked phenomenal. So they're going to be, around in the AFC North. I did have them fourth in the preseason in my predictions, but that was more about the rest of the division, how I saw, than necessarily the Browns not being good. So, maybe they'll shake some things up and cause some chaos. But overall worry meter for the Bengals, I don't really have that much worry for them. I think that they'll be fine as Joe Burrow gets into more of a rhythm. I don't expect T. Higgins not to have any catches. I don't expect Jamar Chase to be held down like that very often. So I think they'll be able to bounce back and really, kind of show more of who they are and what we think they are. I still expect them to win the division. Moving on to the Cowboys, absolutely decimating the Giants on Sunday Night Football. This was over before it even started. The Giants look good on their first drive all the way down to field goal range, and Dallas blocks it, takes it back for a touchdown, and they end up taking a pick six. Tony Pollard had 2 rushing touchdowns. Dak didn't really do anything, didn't have to do anything. Their defense was just so good. They had a number of sacks, a couple interceptions, fumbles, like the whole kit and caboodle. They did everything that you would have expected for an elite defense to do. This is the worry I had with the Giants, just not having that many elite playmakers in the offensive line, struggling a little bit. You could tell Daniel Jones just wanted a wide receiver on the outside to win quickly, and they just really didn't have that guy. Darren Waller was struggling to break in and out of routes with the hamstring injury that he sustained in the week leading up to the game. Saquon looked good, but your running back can only do so much if the defensive line is in the backfield after the quarterback says hike. So we'll see how that goes. Although the Cowboys did look really, really good, so I don't want to dismiss anything that the Cowboys did. I think as an Eagles fan particularly, I'm a tiny bit worried by how good they did look and how good that defense did look. But I would like to see a little bit more, especially in a closer game, before I just deem them automatic Super Bowl contenders. The 49ers, 49ers just looked unbelievable. They looked absolutely unbelievable. They blew out the Steelers. It was a tough game for Pittsburgh. Looked like Kenny Pickett, was struggling a little bit. I smacked his head on the ground early in the game. Looked pretty vicious. I'm not giving him excuses. He stayed in the game, but looked like he was a little dinged up after that. Deontay Johnson was having a good game until he hurt his hamstring. Multi-week absence incoming for him. George Pickens, really struggled until late in the game to get involved in the offense. Allen Robinson looked pretty good, but that defense is just absolutely unbelievable for San Francisco. Them and the Cowboys more than likely have the two best defenses in the NFC, and then along with the Jets, including the whole league. So, Brock Purdy looked good too. I got to give him credit. I'm a guy that's pretty much a hater on Brock Purdy. I don't really think he's the guy, but he looked really good in this game. I don't know what to make. TJ Watt still absolutely dominated that game from a Pittsburgh side of the ball, but it didn't really even matter because the Niners were still able to run the ball. Christian McCaffrey had that long touchdown run. Purdy made throws when he needed to make them. And that was really the story of the day for him, and it's really been the story of his career so far. Just making plays when he needs to make them. So we'll see kind of how that goes as they get into some more competitive games. But for week one at least, they looked absolutely dominant. I'm not selling my Steelers stock yet, but without Deontay Johnson, that offense does become a little bit less explosive. And I need to see more out of Kenny Pickett. I just do for me to be more excited and them to stay out of the basement of the AFC North, especially after how good Cleveland looked on Sunday. The Green Bay Packers went into Soldier Field and once again put their foot on the throat of their little brother in the division. A lot of people were excited about the Chicago Bears coming into the year, especially with the fact that Green Bay doesn't have Aaron Rodgers anymore. They were really excited about beating Green Bay in Chicago, and that just did not happen. Jordan Love looked great. A lot of yak for the receivers, yards after the catch, which made his numbers look a lot better. Aaron Jones, which is an absolute monster offensively. Romeo Doubs looked good on the outside. They didn't even have Christian Watson. Green Bay did not. But Romeo Doubs, 2 touchdowns, looked really good for them. And Jordan Love. Jordan Love looked good. He looked like he was just executing the game plan to a T. And that really is what it came down to. Justin Fields didn't have a phenomenal game. Their offensive line was struggling. They didn't really get much of a running game going. But Green Bay, I think, just reintroduced themselves to a certain degree. I have them second in the division. I wanted to pick them to win the division, but I did end up going with the Lions. But I think the Packers and them are going to be fighting all the way down to the end of the season for the division crown. So this was pretty much what I expected to see from Green Bay, and it's another year where Chicago is picking up the pieces after week one. The Dolphins, let's talk about Miami for a second. They looked like one of the best offenses in the league once again. They won a shootout in Los Angeles against the Chargers. Both teams looked outstanding offensively. Justin Herbert looked great. Austin Eckler looked great for the Chargers, but it comes down to Tua, 466 yards, 3 touchdowns, and Tyreek Hill had over 200 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns, over 10 catches. Like, Tyreek Hill is one of the best wide receivers in the league and is an absolute monster. He could be the wide receiver 1 in terms of fantasy output for Tyreek Hill, as long as Tua stays healthy and is continuing to stay on his game like he was on Sunday. Especially with the Jets losing Aaron Rodgers, there's a legit case that Miami is the favorite in the NFC East moving forward. Obviously, Josh Allen struggled Monday night. The 3 picks, like I mentioned, seemed like he was just trying to make plays out of nothing. And obviously, the Jets defense is one of the best in the league, if not the best in the league. So I don't want to put all that on Josh Allen. But with the Jets kind of falling off and Miami looking as good as they did, there's a legit chance that they could win this division. I mentioned that in the prediction episode, the preview that I put out last episode. So go check that out if you guys haven't checked it out. But they have a legit team. There's no doubt about it. They're going to get Jalen Ramsey back in a month or two to bolster that secondary, so they shouldn't get in as many shootouts, hopefully. But when you got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Tua Tagovailoa, that offensive line, Mike McDaniel's calling plays, they're going to be in games. They're going to figure out ways to score the ball, and they just need something from their defense, and they got a good chance to win the AFC East. Last game we'll talk about here is the Rams and the Seahawks. I mean, the Rams absolutely came out and made a statement. They handled the Seahawks, even with no Cooper Kupp in the lineup. I mean, they came out and they just abused the Seahawks. I mean, the Seahawks took the lead into halftime, and then they didn't score in the second half, and the Rams scored 23 unanswered points. Like, just went on a great run. Their wide receivers looked great for LA, Tutu Atwell, and I don't even know Cuz's name. That was going nuts. Puka Nacua, 10 catches, 119 yards, like on 15 targets. Like, a rookie came in and earned the trust from Matt Stafford right away and dominated. So maybe they're able to tread some water. Maybe they're going to be better than I thought. I mean, they still have probably the best player in football in Aaron Donald on the defensive line. He looked great. And Matt Stafford looked really, really good in that game. I mean, 24 for 38 for 334 yards, no touchdowns, but they were able to rush the ball really effectively. And he was able to make plays when he needed to. I want to see Aaron Donald here. Yeah, Aaron Donald had half a sack, 4 total tackles, was just a game wrecker. And Seattle really struggled to get some things going. DK Metcalf was really the only wide receiver that was doing anything. Kenneth Walker was able to do some stuff on the ground, 12 for 64, but Geno didn't have a good day. 16 for 26, 112 yards, 1 touchdown, got sacked twice, like I mentioned. So really didn't have a great game for Geno. I expect Seattle to be better, but maybe this just says more about the Rams, and maybe we need to take them a little bit more seriously in the NFC playoff picture. And nonetheless, at least out west in the NFC. But that is going to wrap up the episode for today. Once again, guys, check the description below for all our social media handles. Like I said, we're going to have an episode out every week. We're going to have a Substack post out every week too, so definitely keep an eye out for that. That should be out either today or tomorrow. And, let us know if you guys have any questions, anything like that. We'll get it answered on air live. But thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you back here again next time.